Hi, everyone. My name is Trevor Thompson. I'm an acquisitions editor at Eerdmans Publishing, and thanks for joining us today. I am here with Mallory Wyckoff, who is the author of a new Eerdmans book called God Is. Mallory, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself as we begin?
Sure. Hi, friends. Lovely to be with you. Always good to be with you, Trevor. I'm Mallory
Absolutely.
Wyckoff, and one of the first things I tell people is I'm a native Floridian, and Florida is a wild place, and I love it so much. I'm always happy to talk about Florida with folks and just all of its unique and special qualities. But yeah, we lived in Nashville for 15 years and just moved back home. So it's been nice to be here a bit and be by the beach with my husband, Tim, and my girls, Olive and Ivy. So those are some important things about me, and excited to talk about this new book.
Yeah, I on the acquisition side, whenever the proposal came in and I first saw it, I was immediately drawn to the constellation of ideas and the conversations that you were wanting to have with readers through the book, and the thesis of the book and the way you articulated it and wove your own narrative through the pages of the text. And so, for those who are unfamiliar with the book, and hopefully you will be more familiar after this video chat and want to go and check out and read the book. I think for me, it caused me just to stop and think again about just all the basic assumptions about who God is, what I thought about God. I think for a lot of us, there's often some, usually white, bearded, graying beard, maybe a finger, from famous art, and and of course, if you read the text carefully, the biblical text carefully, you realize that God is much more than that, and so can you say a little bit just about your own journey that led you to the point of saying, hey, I want to write a book about God, which is not a small subject.
Right.
So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you get a sense for this really even in the first chapter, where I begin to talk about some of the iterations of my own self and my own story, right? And all these Mallorys that came before, including the current one now, and these movements and this growth and this evolution of who I am and how I understand myself in the world and how I take up space in the world. And my experience has been that as I have paid attention to those shifts and movements and the evolution in my own self-understanding and self-expression, that at the same time, there have been shifts in my understanding and experience and engagement with the divine. And I can't separate one from the other. One informs the other, which then informs the other, and it's circular in that way. And so then I really took time, particularly as a woman, and as I continued to come into myself and experience a lot of freedom and liberation from various structures that have sought to keep me and others like me quite small and quiet and in our lane. As I began to experience some freedom from that, beginning to then experience freedom around the ways that I imaged God, right? And so again, there was such an interplay between those two. And my sense is that if we are seeking for all of humanity to live into our fullness and to flourish, which I hope is all of our intent, then it will necessitate that we also do the same with our theology, with the ways that we think about God, that we would allow God the room to express herself more fully and in distinctly feminine ways, because those have been so sidelined. Sometimes very intentionally, oftentimes very intentionally, sometimes just because people don't know. But whatever the case, it's really harmful. And so I'm wanting to offer this just array of feminine images and metaphors as I say, here's how I think some of the reasons we ended up with a really truncated way of thinking about and engaging God. Here are some of the implications of that. And then here are some distinctly feminine images and metaphors and language to engage the divine a little bit more fully, and also thus ourselves more fully.
That makes really good sense. Can you say a little bit more about some of those images? And again, as an acquisitions editor, there were some, whenever I sort of read the proposal and saw where you were going, I thought, okay, we're going to go here, here, and here. But you surprised me. And I think readers are going to be surprised in ways. So can you say a bit more about that in terms of some of the actual images you draw out? And some of them are in the table of contents, but just maybe to articulate a little bit for some of the listeners.
Yeah. Right. So you can read the list there and see, I talk about God as mother, as midwife, as hostess, as sexual trauma survivor, as home, etc. These are some really distinctly, though not solely feminine images and metaphors for me. And I think the best way to talk about them is just to say they arose from my lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
I just sought to pay attention to the realities of my embodied existence and where God was showing up in the form that she was taking, whether that was the ways I was being mothered or the ways that I was mothering my children, whether it was the ways that I was midwifed,
Right.
literally, metaphorically, or as a hostess. And so just paying attention to my lived experience and seeing, oh, this is pointing to the nature of the divine. This is the way that it's sensing divine expression. Again, whether it's internally within myself or within another human being or in the world at large, really just wanting to take those seriously and then invite others to do the same. Sometimes in some surprising and unexpected ways, sometimes in ways that are just right in front of our own noses. But ultimately with this book, that's one of the things I'm really trying to do is extend that invitation to folks so that they would feel this freedom to say, I want to live with eyes and ears and spirit wide open to see where is God moving within me, within others, and to name the divine there as I see and experience it. So I've sought to do that here with some of these metaphors, certainly not an exhaustive list, but just some of them that have been really significant for me in my own life, and really in paying attention to my own story and experience as the primary source, really as the primary commentary for writing this book.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious a little bit because what you're asking readers, sort of to take off the blinders and to see text and ask questions in new ways, and even as you are, as you begin to formulate, okay, there's going to be this chapter and this chapter and this chapter, they're going to do these things. What surprised you in the course of the writing that you didn't quite see coming, or did you have, even in the course of composition, some aha kind of moments, like I had never seen that, or I had never quite understood God in that way. And it was even transforming sort of the writing and your understanding of God in the moment.
Yeah. There are several things coming to mind. One is that I was really nervous in writing this book, just in a general sense, to say, I don't want to say anything fixed about God, because I was setting the whole premise up by saying this continues to evolve and take new shapes. So I'm going to put into writing that's going to live in a fixed form what I think and how I experience God, and that feels really scary for me. And so I was surprised by the experience of reflecting on those movements and acknowledging there's literally no other option. You will just keep going. So all you have is what is present for you right now. Say something about what is real and true for you in that space. And then as you keep going and as things evolve in you and around you, then say what's real and true for you there. And so that larger reality of this writing experience was really beautiful and surprising for me in some really great ways. As well as when I'm thinking about some of the particular images and metaphors and thinking about, in particular, God is mystery, I had ideas for how I wanted to explain that, because even as I'm trying to give these metaphors in this language for people to grasp onto and engage, I'm also wanting to really hold out that God is all of this and none of it, right? The divine is beyond all of these things, but can be glimpsed through them. So let's rightfully engage them, but let's still hold a space necessarily for mystery. And I didn't know that as I was literally in the middle of writing that process, that my 3-year-old would end up being hospitalized and almost die. And so I talk about this process where I did not want mystery. I did not want ambiguity. I did not want complexity. I just wanted to know, give me the facts. Is she going to be okay? Is she going to make it? And those options didn't exist in my lived experience. And so really having to live into what I was writing about, this idea of of God being breath and what it's like to inhale and to exhale and join in that prayer that is the first prayer that each of us says when we're born and the last prayer that we say when we die. And in doing so, literally saying the name of God, as I talk about in the book. I had to live into that in a way that it was much more than just writing about it, but to actually experience it. That was a really hard and challenging surprise,
Right.
Also a really beautiful one.
Right. One of the things that struck me in our initial conversations, and I think you mentioned this in the very beginning of what we're doing here, this conversation, is you talked about sort of the various Mallorys of your life and iterations, and that's something that I certainly can connect with. There have been different Trevors, and so as we think about God, there's always this kind of strange projection of self and hearing from other people and reading sources, and there's kind of this constant evolution of who God is, what God is about, what God wants. For you, was there a freedom as you understood the dynamic nature of yourself that Mallory now is different than Mallory at 20 or Mallory at 15, and that allowed you to sort of, was that a signal moment for you to remove the blinders and sort of see God anew?
Yes, because the way that I have approached my reflections on looking back at these various iterations is that I don't look back at them. I don't look back at these Mallorys and what Mallory believed or how she made sense of the world at that time. I don't look back and go, oh, well, I was wrong then and I'm right now. That language of right and wrong doesn't feel fitting and true. It feels like those categories just don't fit here. Right. What I do is look back and go, that's what was true for her then.
Right.
And here's what's true for her now, right? What that does is allow for the honoring of what was, but that also, as I then keep going and I move into whatever the next iteration is, it allows me to go, I haven't arrived here, right? There will be more movement. There will be continued growth and evolution. And so I will allow for that, be open to it. And then necessarily so, I don't have it figured out here. And so that generates a certain humility.
Right.
That's our only option, that we don't have another option beyond that, right? There isn't fix and it's done. We could pretend that we do, and many people do, but it's a false option. So instead of decrying that we don't have another option, I just want to lean into it fully and say, so what is real for me here, right? What feels true for me now? Let me engage that fully. Let me push to the edges of that field. Let me play in that space fully. And then when I sense that there's I think I need to nudge a little bit past that. There's something more. I'll transcend what is now, but I'll also include some of what is with me here. That sense of playfulness and curiosity that's engendered in that process absolutely informs the way that I approach my ever evolving and expanding sense of the divine. I'm not looking to get it right? I'm not offering this book to say, I figured it out. Here are the fixed images, right? It's just to say, this is a way of understanding that I think is essential and beautiful and important, but ultimately it's designed to help us glimpse the more that we will continue pursuing and continue experiencing and engaging for the rest of our lives, and I think beyond.
Yeah, I mean, that makes really good sense. And one of the things that struck me, both you as a person, as I came to communicate with you through the process of working with the title, and also in the way you write, is that strong sense of humility, and that's I think for many, declarations about God often come from a place of power and a place of arrogance, and certainty, and for you, there's a great deal of humility and an openness to learning and an invitation to readers to kind of come along with you. With that, as you imagined the reader for the book, who did you have in mind, or for whom do you think the book is best suited? If you could name the ideal reader.
Yeah, it's funny because I almost reflected on that question later in the game. Really, I didn't have a specific audience in mind. I knew I just had to get this book out of me, not unlike being pregnant and you get to the end of it and you go, it's time. It would be more painful to keep this thing in than to get it out. So I had to get it out of me. And then people were saying, great, so who did you write this for? And I thought, yeah, who did I write this for? So I'll just say that even as I was writing, I was thinking about it some, but it was much more kind of in a post-reflection. it might be easy to assume this book is for women. And I will say that I do think that women and girls are inordinately impacted by a narrowed and truncated view of God that is rooted in patriarchy, right? Absolutely. And the reality is that we are all harmed by those constrictions and that narrowing of our sense of the divine. Whether you are a white man and see yourself reflected in that imagery and that language or not, you are still being harmed by that narrowed sense of God and thus of yourself, right? And so really I see this as being equally an invitation to everyone, regardless of their gender, regardless of their embodiment, regardless of how they move and take up space in the world. I do think that folks who have sensed some sense of dissatisfaction with or disenchantment with the current iteration of faith, of theology, of tradition, maybe of church and community, that for those folks, this might be especially helpful for, because it does connect some of that stirring, that longing, that movement, and provides a glimpse into it. And again, it's not a replacement such as, well, what you have right now is wrong, so here's the right? It's just to say, I think there's more here, let's explore it. And so I think a lot of folks in that space will sense into and be grateful for that kind of invitation as they're continuing, like they're keep going, right? I talk about like, I'm going to keep going, for them to keep going and whatever it is. I think this book might be a nice field for them to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. A question for you, for potential readers who see the table of contents, pay attention to how people use pronouns, and may themselves think, oh, this is not for me. This is some kind of wild, crazy notion. And I don't really want to read or understand or even think with this book or engage Mallory on the page. What sort of invitation would you offer to that potential reader as they approach the text?
I am less interested in convincing anyone of anything than I am in generating curiosity. And so I would say, if you don't want to read the book, that's fine. What I would ask is hold curiosity for why. What about reading that list of the table of contents, reading the chapter titles, hearing God as she and her and mother, and talking about breasts, and like, what about that feels difficult, feels troubling, feels challenging, and holding curiosity and reflection around that, because if a person approaches with judgment of the book, they're likely also holding some judgment of themselves, right? Because they come with an assumption that they're trying to find the right option and the right answer. And if they think they already have it, well, why would they explore something like this? And I think there's more here. And I know that my greatest experiences of growth and evolution and change and beauty have been when I've been willing to engage that type of curiosity and say, I'm noticing resistance here. I wonder what that is. I'm feeling fear stir up. I'm feeling that a ton right now as I'm vulnerably putting this thing into the world, right? Okay, so taking time, I'm noticing the fear here. I wonder what's behind that for me. And then taking some time to attend to that, to explore it, to write about it. To me, that process is ultimately, it's like the through line for this whole book. It was certainly true of my writing it, but I also want that to be the experience people are having, whether it's just looking at the table of contents and nothing more, or whether it's reading all the chapters, to really to hold curiosity and ask really thoughtful questions about what's coming up for them.
That makes really good sense. And let me just say, you did a really good job. You did a great job in writing the book, and it's a courageous book, and it caused me to think. I'm reminded again as we sit here and talk how easy it is to get lost in the ideas, and time just starts to slip away from us. And so there's a lot of other questions I want to ask you, but we don't have time to do that. So I want to say to those who are listening, please go check out Mallory's book, God Is. You can find it at Eerdmans.com. It's worth your time to all the listeners out there. And it is a book that will change you in meaningful ways. What I want to do to end this live session is just hand the floor over to you, Mallory, and to read a little excerpt. And again, to congratulate you and to thank you for writing a brave book. And with that, I'll just kind of proceed into the background here.
Thank you, friend. Grateful for you. Okay, I'm going to read a part of chapter 6, God is Creator. I'm going to read the beginning and the ending, which feels like a little bit like cheating. So you're going to have to get in and get the gist of the middle, but I think it will suffice for today. So chapter 6, God is Creator. Thick thighs save lives. I'm never really certain what this phrase means exactly, but I do know it's true. When I was 14, my mother was in a plane crash that by every account should have killed her. In part, what helped save her life were her thick, strong thighs. That woman has been rollerblading all over St. Petersburg, Florida since the early 1990s, well before 20-somethings with fanny packs made it ironically cool again. At the gym, when men use the leg press machine after her, they sheepishly have to lower the weights. She is strong. Minutes before the 14-hour emergency surgery where doctors anticipated having to amputate her legs to keep her alive, she overheard the surgeon's comments. "She's built like a brick shithouse," he said. Thick thighs helped save her life. I inherited these life-saving thighs, though mostly up to now they've just made it impossible to find good genes. I have my grandfather's calf muscles, just what every girl hopes for, thick and round. Like him, I sweat like it's as essential as breath, like the moisture on my upper lip and underarms is forming a reservoir in case of a coming drought. Somehow, I keep managing to make friends with the kind of people who once read something about sweat on the internet, but have yet to encounter it in real life. My best friend, also not a sweater, has to hold weights on a stair climber in order to force the steps downward. We've been best friends since we were 3 and have shared clothes approximately 0 times. I've spent my life navigating these tensions in a world that values women's smallness. All sorts of systems have conspired together to create a supposed ideal, a standard by which bodies in general and women's bodies in particular are evaluated. Even women who work hard to resist these systems and live freely in their frame, whatever it may look like, will tell you that it's hard to exhale self-love when the air around you is laced with stories and images and standards that promote self-loathing. There are seasons when I wrestle with that self-loathing, when the external pressures to stay small in body collide with the internal pressures to stay small in spirit. But I always come back to my origin story, to the family that made me and whose genes are mine. I realize that even if I wanted to, I can't for a second make these thighs any smaller. They are going to take up their space whether I like it or not. I think somehow thick thighs has saved my life. Skipping to the end here. On the days when whatever peace I've made with my thick thighs feel like a tenuous ceasefire on the verge of collapse, when I'm tempted to go small in body and spirit, I close my eyes and imagine I'm in a garden. I sense the lush grass beneath my feet and give way to the grounding energy rooting me to the earth. I exhale what toxic air remains within. I inhale the same pure air God breathed into my nostrils when I first became a living being. I remember my origin story, where Creator formed humans from the dust of the ground and called us very good. I see the dirt, the dust, the clay at my feet, and remember this is the stuff I'm made of. And I find Creator there, in a small studio tucked away in the corner of the garden. She's huddled over a pottery wheel, once again playing in the clay. I observe her, the coarse grain curls that dance around her face and down her back, loose and wild, the earth tones filling the space around her, her jewelry and dress decorating her body and illuminating her spirit. the fullness and beauty of her frame. I feel alive in the creative energy, the hum of excited anticipation. I feel at peace in the calm, a quiet and contented stillness. She looks up from her work and calls for me to sit with her. Her voice textured like a massive rock face worn smooth by a steady stream. I think to myself, now I know why the sun burst forth at the mere sound of her voice summoning it to life. Now I know why it feels no shame in taking up its space. I watch her creative, expansive energy pulling the clay up from the wheel and into fuller form, feeling the same creative, expansive energy course through my veins. I linger there and I watch. When she looks at me, I can't help but speak. I want to be like you, I tell her. You are, she says. Friends, thanks for joining us today. Lovely to be with you. Thank you to Trevor and my friends at Eerdmans for being such an integral part of this really special project. If you would like to get the book, you can order it through Eerdmans or wherever books are sold. I look forward to chances to have further conversations with you all about how you're experiencing the book and how God is showing up in your life. Peace, friends.